Looking good. And here we go. All right, my friends, hello and welcome to another episode of Talk Power BI. You know this one is going to be special because we have with us the famous, the one and only Curbal. So I'm going to be introducing her really soon. Hey, just wanted to check with you, all of you. Say hello to us. Let us know where you're watching us from. I love hearing that. I know you're placed all over the world. And so hello to everybody. So let us know, and let us know if our audio is coming in loud and clear, because I want you to hear every word that Kerbal or Ruth Pozuelo Martinez has to say to you. So, of course, we all know her from her YouTube channel, and I'll share a quick story with you. So I contacted Ruth, where and I reached out to her, and I was just kind of starting out on my own, and I was starting out in my YouTube channel, and I think I reached out to her and said, "Oh, Ruth, I'm such a fan. Gosh, I love your channel." And Ruth replied back and said, "Oh, Avi, I was kind of a fan of yours when I started the channel." So she had known me from the book. So it's pretty amazing, so certainly I believe that, yeah, we both certainly feel inspired by each other. And of course, sometimes people talk about of like they say, "Oh, is your competitor Ruth." I'm like, I don't see the world that way. And yeah, so of course, recently we had a chance to kind of connect and talk a bit more and hang out, and this happened from that. So what I'm trying to do here is, hold on, guys, I'm trying to figure out how to give root controls. And oh well, I lost it. Where is it? Mm, Ruth, can you try? Can you? Oh, there it is. Found it. Okay. All right. So there we go. That's much better. Uh, all right. So let me check into the chat. Let's make sure audio is working. We're getting a lot of hellos. So I assume you heard me right. And yeah, I was checking the audio on my side as well. So we're gonna assume everything is go. So Ruth, uh, why don't you go ahead and definitely introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about yourself, certainly about your consulting business. Everybody knows your YouTube channel, but tell us more about kind of the consulting work that you do, the kind of companies you help. And then, yeah, you can feel free to dive ahead into your session. So today's session is 7 Deadly Sins of a Power BI Beginner. So, guys, yeah, hold on for that.
Yes, thank you, Avi. Can you guys hear me? You see that?
Yeah, audio levels are coming in good on my side. Yeah, I'll keep monitoring. I'll prompt
Okay.
you if something goes off, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know. Okay, good. Thank you, Avi, for having me here. Yeah, I remember. First of all, my name is Ruth Pozuelo.
Yeah.
I have a consulting firm called Curbal, based in Sweden, and I work with clients both locally and internationally. So, in today's talk, or how do you call this live session with Avi, I would actually love to talk with you guys about when I first started using. It wasn't Power BI; it was actually Power Pivot in Excel.
Hmm.
But a lot of the things, Power Pivot and Power BI, it is quite similar on both platforms, so it applies anyhow. So I would like to talk about all the mistakes I made as a beginner.
Oh, you're coming clean. All right, let's go.
Yes.
You're in for a treat.
Oh, painful, painful, painful mistakes. And I can imagine if you are a beginner, you're probably suffering this. If you're not, you probably recognize the mistakes. Because I can imagine if you come especially from the Excel world, I'm pretty sure that you've done, if not all of them, quite a few.
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah.
So
I'll raise my hand for whichever ones apply.
yeah. Oh, I'm curious about that one. You guys in the comments, raise your hand also.
Yeah.
You cover that,
Excellent.
so
Well,
we know.
type it in the chat. Yeah, let us know. All right. So
Yeah,
if you are doing it right now, or you found yourself doing it when you were switching to Power BI, terrific.
yeah.
Sounds great.
So just raise your hand so we know how many guilty people, sinful people we have here
Yeah.
today.
Oh, great. So before we go ahead, so if folks do want to reach out to you for your consulting help, your website is
Curbal.com.
awesome. Yeah, easy to remember, folks. And yeah, there's a whole story behind that name. There's an amazing story behind the logo. Go check out a channel and website, and it's pretty amazing. So yeah, all right, take it away, Ruth.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Okay, let me see if I can share everything. If I share screen one and screen two, I see you there. Let me see if I share that. Do you see my presentation?
I'm looking at the desktop right now.
Okay, so let me do it again because that was not stop sharing. Just a second. I want to share whiteboard iPhone screen one. You should see the slideshow. How about now?
Coming up. Yes. Ah, burning in hell.
Awesome.
Love that slide. All right, 7 deadly sins in Power BI. Awesome. We see it.
Yeah, that you probably made together with me. Okay, so here it goes, my story of how I actually started with. It was Power Pivot in Excel, but anyhow, it just relates to Power BI, and I've made the same mistakes when I started in Power BI too. So, but here's the thing: I was working for a company 9 to 5 job, and I actually need to have information from a database that it was, information about motors. We have our testing data of motors there, and I needed the data. And that database was humongous. It was big. It was all the testing data that we have for all the motors for all the years. So I tried to put it in Power BI, in Excel, and you guys can imagine what happens when you try to pull millions of rows in Excel, right? It just doesn't fly. It's not possible. So I went online and then I started to search, okay, how can I put a lot of information in Excel? And I found actually on Google that a few hits of a new add-in in Excel that made possible to load a lot of information in Excel without it crashing. I was like, oh, awesome, great. And I had it tested. So I went down and downloaded, and Power Pivot came alive for me.
Oh, nice.
I remember, oh my gosh, it was a greener Excel. So it looked like Excel, but it had a greener color to it. And I thought, I got this, no problem. So I started clicking, because I wanted to change a few things on the source. And I started clicking on the green cells and I couldn't click on them. And I started clicking and clicking, like, why cannot I click? I come from Excel. So in Excel, you can click on a cell. So why? So I went back to Google and said, why can I not click? There was no information about that, actually. It was very little information. Yeah. And that's why I find you guys from PowerBIPro, when you were there.
Yeah, I was there at that time, yeah.
It was amazing. You guys were the only ones I could actually understand what it was about. And I went back to your blog all the time. It was a huge, huge, huge fun, actually. And I learned a lot. So anyhow, going back, I understood, okay, you cannot click on anything. So I loaded everything in Excel, and then I started, doing pivot tables, the thing that I knew. So I was still anyhow curious about, okay, what is this Power Pivot thing? Because I was reading online that it is a great thing. It's one of the things, probably the best things that will happen to Excel. It is very useful. You can do a lot of amazing calculations, blah, blah, blah. So I thought, okay, I have to give it a go. So I actually started to, learn more with the help of your guys' blog. I thought it was amazing. And I remember that doing, I was trying to do, I'm going to show you, hopefully you will not lose me, but let me know if you do. Do you see Power BI?
Yeah, yes.
Awesome. Great. So what I was trying to do, simple calculations in the beginning, right? I wanted to have, obviously I was not trying to do unit price times quantity, but I wanted to have two columns and multiply them together. Yeah. And how do you do that? You say, okay, you can do measures, which it was called something else. What was it called, Abby? It was calculated measures.
I actually don't remember. I remember them as measures. Yeah,
I think they changed the name. It was calculated something, and then they changed to measure. Anyhow, so you had two ways. You have measures, and then you have calculated columns, and it was a little very unclear for me what was what. So I read somewhere, start with measures. So I would go here and say, okay, do a new measure, all of these in Excel, obviously. And I wanted to have unit price time quantity. So it went here, unit, is not Y, Why I don't get anything? How many times has that happened? In the
Yeah.
measure, you cannot put the
Yeah, the
column.
autocomplete. I still keep trying to click the column to select it, and I swear it works in Power Pivot, but it doesn't work here. And the few times that I'm doing a calculated column, I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, this is
Yeah,
horrendous.
but
All right.
now I'm doing a measure, so you cannot put a
Yeah.
naked, what they call it back then, it was a naked column. You cannot put a column. You have to put an aggregator, right? You have to put a function first, and then the unit price will come up. And I was trying just to put the column, and it was so frustrating. And intelligence is done to help you make the right thing, right? To write the formula in the right way. But it can be like very, very annoying. And I mean, all those things take
Yeah.
me to my first deadly sin, which it was. This is how I felt working with Power BI, Power Pivot. Extremely frustrated and angry. With like, oh my god, why can I not make a multiplication
Hmm.
in Power Pivot? How hard can it be? But it was actually quite hard. So what I realized it was that if you do a calculated column, calculated columns work very much like Excel. So you can actually go here and write the unit price and it comes up. And then you can type quantity, quantity. And then suddenly you get the calculation, you get the formula, and it propagates all the way through all the rows, something that doesn't happen in Excel. So I thought, yay.
Nice.
So for me, calculated columns was like a way to work in Excel, but doing it in Power Pivot or in Power BI. It was an easy way to do things without actually having to understand DAX all that much.
Oh yeah,
You know?
and I remember that in Power Pivot, maybe it still has that. As soon as you loaded the table, right next to it, it was it showed like an empty column, and it said add a column. So right, I mean, it seemed like an invite that, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. So yeah, it did seem kind of natural.
Very unnatural, especially coming from Excel world. It was very, very unnatural. So that takes me to my second scene that I did all the time in the beginning. Any guess to what that is?
Oh man, you did too many calculated columns.
Yay!
No, gosh.
I promise you, my models were only calculated columns.
Yeah,
That's it. Because it was so easy for me. It was like, oh, I got this. Like,
yeah.
and if you remember, my model was my data set was very big. I have a
Hmm.
lot of rows.
Yeah.
So a lot of, a big model, a big data set, together with a lot of calculated columns
Hmm.
equals
Oh,
crash.
man, yeah.
Excel crashed on me all the time. I would be working and then suddenly just freeze, crash, and say goodbye, and then I had to start all over again.
I've
It
heard
was,
that. Yeah, people come to me and it's like, Avi, you say it can handle hundreds of millions of rows. I have a 10,000 row data set. And of course, I mean, often I was like, well, how many columns do you have? Sometimes it's in hundreds. It's like, yeah.
exactly. So that was on my models. I just still have a copy of some of the old models, and they have a lot of calculated columns. And it is a way to get started. So
Hmm.
fine, but if you have a lot of data, Power BI will punish you for that. See, definitely will
Yeah.
punish you. One thing I found is that, while Excel crashed and burned, Power BI slows down, which is a
Hmm.
nicer way to tell you that, well,
Yeah.
maybe your calculations are not that good
Yeah.
instead of just
Y- Yeah, but there's something there. So I'm thinking about, well, I mean, yeah, I crossed 40 last year. So it's kind of like when you're young, you can get away with eating a lot of bad stuff, right? I mean, yeah, so you can be in this gluttony mode and get away with it. And I feel like often people start out and they're not yet working with big size millions of rows. They're just working with small data set and they can get away with calculate columns. But yeah, as you progress towards bigger things, yeah, it just starts to definitely, you start experiencing this. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's it. So here's the thing with calculated columns, what happens is that it takes up a lot of memory on your model, a lot of RAM memory. So the more columns that you have, the more difficult you make it for Power BI to actually have free space to do all this stuff. So it is actually recommended to have as many measures as you can, but creating measures is not as intuitive as creating calculated columns. So I guess as a beginner, it is normal to do a lot of calculated columns. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But it takes me to the next scene, which looks like that. Any guesses to what that could be?
I have no idea. Guys, any guesses? What is the guy doing? Hoarding? I don't know.
Greed.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. But
And
greed of what?
strong decided
Ooh.
to get more and more. Here's the thing. When I started with my doing Power Pivot and Power BI, I imported everything
Mm,
from a data source, everything, all the tables, all the columns, all the everything. Even if I
wow.
don't need it, I
Uh-huh.
imported absolutely everything
Boy.
because maybe I needed it some time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this is something that I also battle with my customers quite often because they tell me, especially if I work with IT, from the IT side, not from the business side, they say, okay, we want to have a model that works for a lot of business, for sales, from marketing, and then we need to have these columns and these columns. And I think in the source it's okay that it is there, but you should only import the things that you need.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it will crash and burn again on you, definitely. And there's another thing, and is that it's not so user friendly. So if you have a model that is very, very big with hundreds and hundreds of columns, it's very difficult to find what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So yes, you can search, but people call things differently even within a company. So it's not so intuitive to maybe know that, okay, this is what I should look for. So I always prefer to have my
Mm-hmm.
models very, very small.
I love it. I love it. So I often talk to people about, so hey, there is an IT world and total respect to them. They're really smart folks building data warehouses and so forth. But that doesn't mean, so what I often see my students do is what I call they have the data warehouse throw up inside Power BI. They connect to the data warehouse and pull everything in and let it auto detect relationships. And I open the model, it's in a hot mess, and relationships going everywhere, dotted lines going everywhere, and yeah, I'm like, what is that? And they have no idea themselves. So yeah, just because
Exactly.
you have a data warehouse doesn't mean that's what you need in Power BI. So yeah, guys, say no
Exactly.
to greed and yeah, kind of
Exactly.
less is
No,
more.
we're not greedy anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, I did this a lot, and it was also a laziness thing. And I said, okay, I import everything, and who cares? But it will punish you later on if you
Yeah.
you will get performance issues.
Yeah. And yeah, I'll
And
just say one quick thing. So I think maybe I know I had heard this kind of mindset from IT as well. I remember speaking to an IT person who had a report with 250 columns. And I'm like, well, and I was just genuinely curious, like, why would you create such a report? And he said, oh, I wanted them to have everything. But the
exactly,
challenge, guys, is it's kind of like one of those things that if everything is priority one, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. By trying to give them everything, you give them nothing because they can't really use that information. They're going to have to filter it, sort it down. So your job is not to try to give them everything, but yeah, we give them kind of what they need, and you can always evolve, right? You can always go back and say, oh, okay, you need this column for this. I'm gonna go back and get it, right?
exactly, and that is a great point, Abby, because one of the things that I found out is when you have a model with everything in and you give it to the business users, it is very, very hard then to take the columns back because say, no, I seen that is there, leave it there, maybe I need it.
Yeah, good
But if
point.
you make the
Yeah,
model smaller in the beginning, and then they tell you, "Oh, I need also column," it's easier to give it back. To put it in.
yeah,
Very difficult to
yeah, and
improve.
sometimes it's okay to kind of push back a little. I mean, obviously not always, but sometimes, and just it's gonna help you as a modeler. Where I ask them, cool, tell me more about it. Tell me why you need the column for, what you're gonna do with it. And of course, with the answers you get, of all, as a modeler, I'm also looking at, well, I don't just give them the column. Maybe they need some kind of a measure around it. Maybe they want to see the average, or maybe something more complicated. So yeah, I mean, just understand that. Oh, okay, you need this column, but why?
Exactly, exactly. I'm going to give you a tip of how I normally do in case it helps. So when I obviously when you start a new model, you might not know the data. So it can be a little bit hard to say, okay, what should I take out, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to just do the visualizations, then go back and say, okay, what didn't I use? But what I normally do is I try to leave a third of whatever is in there always, always. And I push my hardest to leave only a third. The rest has got to go. And then if I need it, I can bring it back. And something that I use is in Power Query, when I get a new model, you have these, I can take it away. You have this column distribution, we will do this, and then this column profile that it will give you some information about the columns.
Nice.
And this I learned actually watching a data scientist work. I thought it was awesome. So what he did, it was just he got the data, and then, you know, for data scientist tools, they have a lot of ways, or an easier way to do this descriptive statistics to see exactly, you know, to see the model, how it looks like. They have a habit of doing that. How does my model look like before actually doing any analysis? And this is what it does. It basically tells you how many unique rows you have, how many distinct you have.
Yeah.
And this is the Northwind dataset, which is a dataset used for training. So it is very well modeled. It is small. It doesn't have a lot of flaws. But if you work with real live data sets, you will see that there is a lot of columns. That, for example, you go in here and they have like 80% empty and they have 2 unique values. Maybe you can remove it already right from the get-go. So probably that column was used once in a while, or categorizing something that is not being used anymore. Or you see that there are a lot of rows that are just empty. They are there, but they have no information. So by going through these, you can just look at them and then go here and say, okay, what is this? There are 91, there are 60 empty, and there are 19 distinct. There's not much information in here. Maybe I can remove it.
Yeah.
Right? So it gives you an idea of how your data set looks like before you actually go into the data set and see what do you want to do. And then if you need a column, bring it back later. In Power Query, it's like super quickly.
Nice.
So hopefully that helps. And another trick, if you import everything, you just do the visualizations, there are tools available to, after you, when you finish everything, you plug in this tool. I think it's Power BI Helper from Radicant, for example.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Because it will tell you what columns you didn't use, what tables you didn't use, what measures you're not using, and then you can just clean afterwards if you don't want to do it in the beginning. So I really recommend you to do that. So, you know, it allows you to clean before actually giving that to the model.
You know, so I'm not a musician at all, but I've heard this phrase used by others where they say that the music is actually the silence between the notes. And man, I've always found so profound. And I think it's like, you know, modeling is so much about what you leave out. And oddly enough, I've been talking about kind of visualization and so forth, and there I also talk about how the important element is white space. So yeah, I'm finding it kind of really interesting that how those elements kind of connect together.
Yeah, cool.
Terrific.
Cool.
Keep going.
So let's go to my next scene. How about that?
That's laziness, right? I think the word is something different, but
I'm willingness to work or make an effort. Yes.
Okay.
So here's the thing.
I didn't expect this from you, Ruth.
Which one, to be lazy?
Yeah, you know, you're always so full of energy.
Oh, I'm lazy. I am. I promise. But in this case, the laziness I'm referring to is, you know, when you go into Power BI, let me show you. I think it's easier to show. You know, when you import the data, you get these, you see them here? They are the implicit measures. So they are columns that you want to make a measure of, or you can use, for example, the quantity, you can put it in there, you can use it right away. You don't need to do sum of quantity as a measure, right? And at the beginning, even if I knew this, I didn't do it. You know, they recommend to do explicit measures. It means that you take this and you do a measure sum of quantity, and you use the measure instead of using the column like that. And I didn't do it because I was lazy. So it is true, actually. And what happens with measures, and one of the wonderful things with measures is they are what they call it portable. You can write one measure and then put it inside another measure and reuse it, right? And then you put it inside another measure and you reuse it. Well, now imagine that this quantity measure or column, you put it inside 30 new measures and you change the name. What happens?
Well, now it fixes everything, right?
Do they change the name?
Uh, if it's a measure to begin with, then
If it is a measure, yeah, the first measure will break. And then the other ones, when you fix one, the other ones that are inside will get fixed also, right?
yep,
But
yeah.
if you use just the column, the raw column inside, and you don't use an explicit measure, if you use the implicit measure and this breaks, all the other measures will break. And you will have to change on each one of them, on all of them, instead of
Really?
just using the explicit measure. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but gosh, I guess I'd forgotten that. I had been hadn't yeah. So that yeah, this is definitely something not fun. I mean, overall, I do feel that implicit measures. I feel like they give you less control. I always get into trouble with like smaller stuff as well, where formatting it and all that stuff. I always feel more in control with measures.
Yeah. Me too. Now I do it. I do explicit measures because I had like big models where, it is very, very, very often that you change the name and the source. It happens a lot. Even if you think like, how often is that going to happen? Well, more often than you may imagine. So I had to go through the pain of fixing hundreds of measures just because they change on the source. And
Ouch.
I have to change it everywhere instead of just changing the explicit measure. So I'm not doing that mistake anymore, not being lazy. But oh
Nice.
my God, that was painful, painful lesson to learn. I
Cool.
promise.
So yeah, folks, implicit measures, just don't do it. Don't give in to sloth, laziness.
Slot. Next one. Are you ready?
But I don't know. That doesn't look like a sin.
Oh, the
Okay. All right. Well, I guess it is.
So the excess of belief in one's abilities.
uh,
So this was actually, I don't know, I was a little bit, when I was, thinking about it, it was like, maybe it's not a bad thing to have, depending on the context, obviously, but on this context. Because when I started with, for me, Power BI, the difficulty comes in Power Pivot, right? Because I come
mhm.
from the Excel world. So DAX is the thing that I have to think the hardest to be able to fix it. So when I started with Power Pivot, because it looked like Excel and it behaved a little bit like Excel sometimes, and it had, the functions were similar to Excel. I
Mhm.
actually thought that how hard can it be?
Mhm.
You really looks like Excel, is made like Excel. It's probably Excel.
Yeah.
It was not. Oh my God, I was beaten on this one a lot. I mean, DAX. It looks easy, I think, because it's so Excel. It just looks so much like Excel, but it is not that easy, really. It takes a little bit of work to understand how filters work and how
Yeah.
DAX works. And
Well, spot
yeah,
on. I mean, yeah. So I think it is definitely kind of a case of pride or definitely a sin. I would say that people come into this with a very Excel mindset, and yeah. So I often say that learning Power BI is a lot about unlearning. You got to leave that stuff behind. The longer you hold on to that, the
that's
more it's gonna
wonderful.
hurt you. And of course,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen other versions of that. I've seen people who come from a SQL background, and all they do, believe it or not, Ruth, is since they're so used to writing SQL queries, they write DAX queries. So their model, they wouldn't do measures. They would just do like a DAX table. I'm like, that's static, right? So yeah, so guys, yeah, if you're coming from something, give it a fresh start, and yeah, be open to kind of starting from the first rung. Right? Be open to feeling like a
Yeah.
beginner for a little bit. So yeah, that man, that's this is going deeper than I thought. I'm like, wow.
I'm opening my soul, my power
Yeah.
people. No, so for sure, I agree with you. I mean, now when I go back to Excel, I feel that I unlearned so much that I'm having trouble doing some things in Excel actually. So I'm not in Excel.
Oh boy, yeah, I feel ya. I feel ya. Sometimes like, oh shoot, let me just go back to Power BI.
Exactly. Oh my god. But then yeah, DAX is like I said, it's not easy, but if you understand the principles and if you go, because I get into Power BI with being a little bit naive, like I said, like how hard can it be? And then you go at it, and then you try it, and you try it, and then you burn, and then you try it again, and
Yeah.
then it works.
Yeah.
So
I mean, let's just admit we've all been there, and if you're starting on this journey, you're gonna be there too. So Ruth, yeah, I'm sure you've experienced it. Man, I remember spending time where it would be something really simple. I know the first thing that I was stuck with the relationship, and I knew Excel, which didn't have relationships, but I knew SQL, and I knew a SQL join, and I expected Power BI relationship to work like that. I said, oh look, I have connected these tables in a relationship. That means I've joined them. But nope, didn't work like that. And I remember spending a day or more just being really, really frustrated with that. So
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, right?
yeah,
Okay, so we move to our next scene. Are you ready?
yeah. How many have you done? I got so caught up in it, I've lost count. Do you know?
I think I have two left. This one and another one.
Oh, all right. You guys, I don't know this one. Jen? So Jen guessed the last one. Jen Nabel on YouTube. Put in your guesses, folks. I don't know. I don't remember my sins. All right. Ruth, clue
Are
me
you
in.
ready?
Yep.
Envy.
Oh, okay. It's a girl in the back. I didn't see her almost.
This
I
is the
was
girl in
focused
the
on
back. It's
the
supposed to
ones
be
in the
the.
back. Okay, I'm really curious about this one. I mean, the other ones you said the word, I'm like, I think I know what she's talking about, but I have no clue in this one. What
So,
would
the
Ruth
design
be?
for others'
Is there
ability.
anything that Ruth would be envious of? I can't imagine, folks. So let's find out.
Oh, a lot. Definitely. I am envious of, you know, Marco and Alberto's DAX abilities.
Oh gosh,
Oh, from another
yes,
world.
I know.
This is not this. This is something else.
Oh, this is okay.
Here's the thing.
I was ready
I
to wallow in that pit with you. I'm like, yeah, gosh, those Italians. Please do something. All right.
well, I'm Spanish, so maybe I'm not that far off, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Who knows?
Um, yeah. I
So,
freely admit that I don't understand half of the stuff they do, but the half that I do understand, I find incredibly helpful. Yeah, those guys are pretty amazing. All right, but you said this is about something else. So, ooh.
it's about something else. It's about something else, and this is something that I'll tell you. Here's the thing: when you've done all the technical stuff in Power BI, right? You imported the data in Power Query, you fixed your model, you're doing DAX calculations. This is fantastic, and then you have to do the visualizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with the visualizations, I mean, when you are doing all that stuff, you've seen this 1,000 times. You come here to the calculations, and then you have to do the visuals and the design. I did visuals, and then I stopped there. Like that's it. And I found more often than not that it takes a long time to do the technical stuff. That when you get to the actual creative part of doing visualizations, making it look beautiful, I was a little fed up with the model already. Right? It's like
Yeah.
I just want to get this done and move on. So the part with the branding and design, it was something that I did not put a lot of effort in. And then I saw, let me show you this guy, Miguel Mayers. This was at the beginning of Power BI. I don't know if it was a contest on the Power BI community. I don't remember, but he
Mm-hmm.
showed this one and he showed that one.
Yeah.
And it didn't look like a Power BI report at all. It looked like art. It was just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, how amazing is this one? And then you go through the other ones, and it's just a way to present data that is appealing, that it looks nice. It's not just, let me show you. For example, here, we'll talk about that in a second. This is one visualization. It is a little bit
Mm-hmm.
overdone, but you can do that or you can do this one, right? There is a huge difference into how something looks like and how you convey the information that you've worked so hard to get, right? You spend hours doing the technical part, and then suddenly you finish everything and you leave it here. I feel that is such a shame. Obviously, this takes time.
Yeah.
Here's another example, that one or that one. I mean, it's just that the last 20% of your work, what it says here, it really matters. It is a difference between somebody not looking at your amazing technical made report or somebody using it and showing it off, right? So I think that it is very important to have the technical abilities, but the storytelling abilities, the design abilities are really important too. And I understand that if you are very technical, you might not enjoy or want to do the visualization part in a beautiful way. But
Mm-hmm.
then it's good to have somebody that can do that. Anyhow, you can have somebody, for example, at the marketing team that is very creative and can do some cool backgrounds for you, or you can hire somebody that can do some design for your reports, or have a
Yeah.
template, have a theme for your company. It will make the difference between a report that sits there and die and a report that gets used. And you have the possibility to measure the usage if you publish your reports on powerbi.com, and it will be an amazing challenge for you guys to check it out, to do a report where you don't do the visual part, and then to do another one where you do and measure the difference.
Like an A/B testing, huh?
Yeah, to see if there's actually worth the effort in your company and how much usage you get out of one or the other.
Wow. Hey, can I ask? Do you remember like how long ago did this realization hit you?
It was when he posted that. I don't know when it was,
Oh, so
maybe
this was some time ago. Yeah, I'll admit that.
2016.
Oh wow. Yeah. So man, I feel like I'm coming to this pretty recently. So pretty recently we started this whole series on dashboard makeover, and frankly, I struggle to kind of reconcile it in some way. So I always say that if you're a Power BI like model author, and those are the audience that I typically cater to, right? And then I talk about the 80-20 rule, and I say, the value you're going to get is from under the hood. That's going to give you 80% of the results. That's the query editor and all that. And if you do that right, then visualization is easy. So I say that, and I mean it, and I think that's absolutely valid. But I've also realized that the customer doesn't see that. They don't see under the hood. They only see what's in the front. As far as they are concerned, that is Power BI. They couldn't care
Exactly.
less about the model and how clean your relationships are. I mean, yeah, I want you to care about that as a model author. But I think as far as they're concerned, 80% of the stuff is visualization. Obviously, I think there is a little bit the model, like if the model is crappy and then they ask for something and it takes you 3 weeks to do it, they're obviously going to experience that on the visualization side. That, oh, I didn't get my new visual, so that's the 20%. But it's so yeah, it's almost this this kind of these two I don't know, universes almost, that two ways to think, where one is that, oh, from the model author perspective, that's the 80%, but you got to also recognize that from the end user, that's the 80%. So wow, this is again, and we started to do the dashboard makeover series, and that was just a few months ago. We've done three now, so I'm really new to kind of this thing. So I yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for sharing. I really, really think that it's important. And as I said, it's good to test and measure how much do you actually need to do in order to get more usage out of the reports. Because I've seen amazingly technically done reports that are not being used because they are not so usable. It's not just about the look and feel, the colors, or the graphic design. It's usability too. Can I click here and go directly to
Oh yeah,
customer churn, or do I have to open three reports in three different Power BI tenants to get there?
yeah.
Right. So
Oh,
you have
absolutely.
accessibility. So there are a lot of things to take into account to be able to have a good Power BI report. But definitely, if they look good,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good start, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's also in a big way not just about looking good, the aesthetics, but sometimes the aesthetics also make it more usable, so they can
Yes.
have the user kind of focus on the right things. They can almost kind
Exactly.
of walk them through a journey. It's like, oh yeah, this makes sense, and I know how to read it. That's pretty important. And what I would say, folks, is that definitely sometimes I you might be saying, maybe I used to say this to myself too. It's like, oh yeah, that's not me. I can't do those pretty stuff. But what I found is, as I started to do it, I started to enjoy it. And
Yeah.
I think of that. None of my kids play any instruments, musical instruments, but some of my friends' kids do. And I remember hearing one of their daughters starting to play violin, and oh my god, she sounded terrible. It was hard to listen. I was like, oh god, try to clap afterwards. But of course, she got better. So yeah, of course, initially, it's not gonna look good, and she's gonna struggle. But just persevere, just continue on that journey, and I think you can enjoy it as well, even if you may think right now that, oh, this is not for me, as I was able to. So there's hope for you.
Yeah. Otherwise, get help. Get help from marketing team
Yeah,
or from a designer. Or I mean, you don't need to do everything. You just need
nice.
to tell them that I need help. They can do like a template. It's possible to do a few like background designs and then have somebody create a theme for you. So you don't have these standard colors. Just the small things make a huge difference. Again, this is like the guy is super good, so nobody expects to have these type of designs. And maybe depending on what you're doing is not desirable either. You want to have more technical design either way, but still, just there is a huge difference between that one and that one, right? So that's the main thing. Okay, last one.
All right. I'm not sure. This guy looks very overwhelmed. Jen, they guess jealousy as well for last one. Is that false? Yeah.
Oh.
All right, let's see if somebody guesses this one. All right, guess this one. Ooh.
Feel a strong desire for something. Who doesn't? Who doesn't? This is a tough one. And I am referring to, when I started with Power BI. And for me, it was actually Power Query that lured me into the BI world. I loved Power Query. It just drove me
Hmm.
nuts. I thought it was the most amazing thing Microsoft developed in years,
Wow.
for sure. It
Yeah.
just, my productivity went up through the roof with just one tool. It was so easy
Yeah.
to do things.
Oh yeah.
So Power Query was my entry point, and then I learned Power Pivot, Power View in that case, and it became Power BI. And I absolutely love Power BI. And I wanted to learn everything about Power BI, right? You want to know everything. You don't want to miss out on anything. And in the beginning, when Power BI started, even though there was a monthly update, even though it was just small things, they were trying to fix and catch up, which it was fine. I was happy with every release because I was doing things in Excel that I couldn't do in Power BI, and that drove me
Mm.
nuts. But then
Yeah.
suddenly Power BI catch up, right?
Yeah.
And then Power BI started to grow and grow and grow. And then PowerBI.com grew and grew. And then you have the Power Platform, and it grew, and it's more and more and more. And you're trying to catch up, and it's just not possible, right? How do you learn everything that the Power team throws at you? How many people are working in the Power BI team? It must be hundreds.
Yeah.
So it's impossible for a person to catch up on what every of those amazing guys and girls are producing, right? So I felt a little bit overwhelmed in between when I was learning. Actually, I thought it was hard to stay on top of things, and I was thinking like, oh, maybe there are things that I should know that I don't know, and it became a little bit overwhelming.
Hmm.
And what worked for me in that case, it was just to start learning things as needed. So when I needed something, I went on Google or I asked somebody and I learned it instead of trying to learn absolutely everything that comes out, because it is just not possible. You have to at some point understand that it's like, don't even try. It just won't work. So learning on a need to know basis. Check in, for example, Guy in the Cube helps because he has this rounds up.
Hmm.
Checking in Amanda's video every month helps a lot. And then whatever you need, you just Google it
Yeah.
and ask your community, right? Your peers, as how do I do that? Otherwise, it is so hard to actually stay on top all the time. How do you feel about that? Do you have the same? fear of missing out things. How do you overcome that?
Man, I'll admit that one hit a chord, and it was surreal. Like, am I looking in a mirror? Yeah. So I'll share my quick story. I went through the same phase. Initially, I was feeling on top of Power BI. I'm like, yep, I'm good. I know this stuff. And then the changes started happening, and of course the universe just exploded, right? And of course there was not just Power BI in the universe. There was Power Flow and Power Apps and all that sort of stuff. So what happened was I started to feel like a fraud, like an imposter. And I was like, well, how the heck? I mean, for one, I mean, I felt like such a mistake. I'm like, shit, I branded myself as Power BI Pro. And how can I call myself a pro if I don't know everything? And yeah, and I was really struggling, not in a good spot. And my rescue came from Bill Jelen, Mr. Excel, and I caught him in a Q&A session after he had presented. He is a great presenter. For one, he's really funny and teaches while he's being extremely funny. So he's brilliant. But then I was hanging out, and somebody else asked him a question, and I don't remember what that question was. But what Bill answered, Mr. Excel standing there right in front of me, he said, "Oh, I don't know Excel." And then he paused. And I'm like, what is he saying? He's like published, I don't know, more than dozens of books. And yeah, he's Mr. Excel, for heaven's sake. And then after the pause, he continues, I don't know Excel. I don't know all of it. And man, that like lifted a weight off my shoulders. Like, whoo, I'm free. Yeah, you don't have to know all of it. So since then, of course, I've developed this whole push versus pull theory of learning. So I feel like the 20% of the core concepts, you do need it pushed to you. It's hard to
Mm.
kind of gather that with bits and pieces, Google and YouTube, steps like that. So for that, if you can get guided learning, it's going to really speed up your journey. But the rest of the 80%, you can always pull it. Yeah, it's just a Google and YouTube away. And I do that all the time, right? I mean, somebody the other day, they mentioned treat ads. I just hadn't never used that function for them. Oh, okay, let me Google it. So yeah, that's okay. But again, as I said, I mean, when you started talking about it, it kind of transported me back to that feeling of overwhelm and the whole kind of
Yeah.
imposter, the fraud syndrome, that I'm not ready for it, I'm just faking it. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
that
but
is a
folks,
problem for
yeah, you
sure.
don't need to feel that way. Nobody knows everything. I mean, except the Italians, they're pretty good. But yeah, though they're exclusion. As Ruth said at the beginning, they're. Let's just admit it. The guys are not from this planet, and it's
No.
okay. There was Superman. He was fictional, but these guys are real, but that's okay. So we in the real world, it's okay to not know everything.
Yeah.
All right, so folks, hey, if you enjoyed this presentation, let us know. Let us know which your favorite sin was. Favorite in the way like, yep, I've done it, or like,
I've
oh, this
done
is a
it.
good
Yeah.
piece of learning. So let us know. Type that in. And if you have any questions for Ruth, let us know as well. So, Ruth, one thing I wanted to clarify was that I should have done it initially. That you're based out of Sweden, but
Yes.
you do consulting for all companies all over the world, right?
Yes.
And it's
That's
kind of
correct.
remote consulting. Just give us some idea of the kind of companies you have consulted with. Has a theme emerged that I tend to help these kinds of companies, or it's pretty generic? Like, hey, if you're doing Power BI, I can definitely help you.
Yeah, no, I help on all types. It depends on what the customer needs help. For example, I help small or Power BI consultants. They said, hey, I need help with these stacks, the formula.
Mm-hmm.
Or I do big projects with big companies. So I have both from like Fortune 50 companies all the way down to single consultants. So if
Yeah.
time allows it, I'm up for helping just about anybody that needs help. And that
Nice.
it goes from, I have companies that is my favorite jobs. Obviously, they said, I have this bunch of data. What do I do with it?
Oh, I
I
know.
absolutely, that's the
I
dream
know.
job.
I often, so for me, it's this challenge, right? That I spend since, I focus on training. Of course, you do too. So you probably spend a lot of time in maybe Northwest Traders or something. But so my data set that I've been using is AdventureWorks. So I spend a lot of time there. So it's to the point where when I see real data, I almost start drooling. I'm like, oh yes, like I would rub my hand, like, finally. Right, so yeah, that feels pretty good. So, do you work with local companies at all? Is it a mix, or do you travel for your work sometimes?
I traveled some, not much actually. For my international customers, I have the pleasure to be able to do it remote, which is awesome.
Yeah,
And I actually started having Swedish companies as customers like this year. So it took
yeah.
longer because all the content I do is in English. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it took longer for Swiss companies to get into my radar. So now I do work with Swiss
Interesting.
companies. Yeah.
So the odd thing that I found out was that even when I was working with local companies, I would go meet them and so forth, but then often a lot of the work was remote. I mean, we would do remote meetings just to save on the trip sometimes. And of course, I would be working offline and just send them a report something. So even there, it's not as hands-on as
Yeah,
the other
no.
stuff.
For this, most of the Swedish companies I work for, I have to be on site. They work
Oh
with
yeah,
report server, so they want you to be there, and it's a different. So I've been working actually with report server for the last 2 months, almost exclusively, and it's like going back to the future season two, right? Where you go to the past
yeah.
and you try to do some work there. It's quite an odd feeling.
All right.
So
All right. So,
yeah.
by the way, Sahil commented that I'm quite sinful if I go by, Curbal's seven deadly sins. So, yep, we're all guilty, my friends, but that's okay. That's the human condition. But that just also means that we can rise above that too. And of course,
Yeah.
just by knowing those sins, knowing and being aware of that, that's the first step. So that's pretty cool. So Ruth, what I want to ask you is, so of course I work with a lot of students in my program. I help them become consultants. So you have been doing this for so long. Are there any tips? So what I experienced was that sometimes I work with companies where I visited them in person and then I started working remotely. And that goes so much better because when I'm there, it's so easy to establish that connection and so
Hmm.
forth. Or do you have any tips for kind of starting that relationship? Is there feels like sometimes when I start working online, it's kind of I don't know. I mean, so one of my friends described it as kind of dating, right? Where this little bit of awkward phase, you're kind of trying to get to know each other, and you don't really kind of trust the person yet, and so yeah, you're holding your cards to your chest. So there's always a phase there. I wonder if you've experienced that, and if you have any tips about hey, how you can kind of smooth that out and make the start of a relationship be a little bit easier working with the client.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually feel the same both for remote work and even in person, because it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, is she really as good as she is, or am I going to be able to do a good job? You start going through these phases like, what type of job am I going to do? And so I don't know. I feel that the awkwardness phase is the same for me, even if when you do it in person or
Mm-hmm.
remote.
Yeah.
But it goes off quite fast, I would say too.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
like, for example, Teams
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely amazing to have a really good connection with the customer when I'm working remote.
Yeah.
Also because I'm on the move a lot, so I have Teams on my phone, and then
Yes.
I can chat with them.
Perfect. So
And
you're
you can
talking about
share tips.
Microsoft Teams. So can I ask you, of what I've experienced with Microsoft technologies is that it works great if everybody is in the kind of that ecosystem, but outside of it, it doesn't work. So, I mean, if that company is using Teams, I can imagine it working seamlessly. But if they're not on Teams, is it still easy to? What do you do? I mean, do you set them up? How does it work? I have no idea actually. Yeah, if they're not
Yeah,
using Teams, how does it
Skype,
work?
Skype or Zoom in the US is a lot of Zoom, for example. So you have to download the tool that the customer is using, but you don't have this ability to share things easier. I have my own server, so I set them up on my server, but it's a large corporation. They normally have Teams. So large
Yeah.
corporations, they have Microsoft. This is the small, medium
Mm-hmm.
small. I set them up on my server because I want to be able to easily transfer files, and they can share files with me, and then we use Skype for business for talking, and sometimes normal Skype. So
Terrific.
I mean, Teams is just such an amazing tool. So
Yeah,
I really love
and
it.
obviously, so of course, I feel so lucky that we live in this world where we can do this remotely. And man, sometimes technology, well, when it works, I always love it, right? I mean, when it doesn't work, it's frustrating. But yeah, I love that. So often when I'm sharing screen, or like my client is sharing a screen, they're showing them something on their desktop, and it's not working, and I can just take over keyboard and mouse control and kind of fix it for them. I love
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. You can actually, I can do stuff on their Power BI remote on
Yeah.
Teams. It's just
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. And then you can blur your background in case you have a lot of stuff like I do.
Yeah.
You can blur everything. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, I was thinking actually, because, Curbal is me. There's nobody else. I do most of the stuff. Well, obviously, I hire people to do some things, but it
Yeah.
is the company is me. But I was thinking, like, oh my God, imagine that I have Office 365, right, to give you all the Office tools. And then you have Teams, just because I have Office 365. And I mean, all these softwares that you get for free today. I have
Exactly.
Trello that is also free for one person,
Mm-hmm.
that allows me, a small company, have the same tools as an enterprise company.
Indeed.
And it makes working with them seamless.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I mean,
It's
I think
amazing.
it is amazing. I think we're living in unprecedented times, and this is a great. And of course, we see the shift happening. I mean, I've heard those metrics where, I don't know, like part time or freelancing number of folks doing that is going to surpass soon the full time employees, and things are moving that way. I remember my coach talking about, when he started, it took him like a month of reading through a Dreamweaver book. He read the whole book, and then took him much longer than to create his website. And now, of course, there's Squarespace, there's Wix, and yeah, if you want, there's WordPress. There's so much options, and you can have a website built in a day easily.
Yes. And you can put
Yeah.
e-commerce in a day. And
Oh, he's
I mean, it's
yeah.
just possible to have all the tools that you need at almost zero cost. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I
So
know.
I'm happy that I.
Oh, I certainly feel blessed. And of course, I think
Yeah.
about, and I talk to some people who run brick and mortar businesses. So I'm part of this group, kind of your online entrepreneurs, and we hang out. And, there's this one person, he's called Chocolate Johnny, guys. By the way, look him up. He's famous. He's from Australia, makes chocolates and so forth. So anytime somebody is complaining about something in this online world of ours, he says, guys, I get up at 4 a.m. to make peanut brittle. All right, stop bloody complaining. And I have, this much. Yeah, so brick and mortar, man, it was a whole other deal. And of course, well, maybe we'll hear that part of the story as well. But you have kind of ventured into that life as well, right? Kind of selling a physical product. And I remember you talked about that. Oh gosh, how are we gonna stock it, inventory, and all that stuff. So yeah, this is a very different world. So hey, this session was gosh, I didn't expect this. It blew me
What?
away because it touched me. I didn't, yeah. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed the
Thank
session.
you.
I got to certainly learn and relearn some of these lessons. So the last thing I want to ask you is that what do you see from your perspective, like the future of Power BI? What do you feel like? Where is this headed?
Oh wow, that's a tough one. Um, I don't know. I have a little bit mixed feelings at the moment, because I'm feeling that Power BI is becoming too much of an enterprise tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the things that I absolutely loved, I getting forgotten a little bit with all these, data flows and all the stuff that is going on, incremental refresh. And I know that all those things are needed for enterprise companies that paid a lot to Microsoft, so they need to be developed.
Mm-hmm.
But still, the actual core of getting data, loving data, massaging data, and
Yeah.
putting amazing visuals, and it gets a little bit forgotten in all these huge innovation around Power BI, and everything now is called Power, right? And everything is connected to Power BI. Like before, it was an Excel button to everything. Now we have a Power BI button coming up. So I've, I don't know, I'm struggling a bit to.
I feel yeah. I
You
totally
do?
get it.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
thought it was just me.
yeah. This is the second time, by the way, guys. Let's just screen. This is the second time where I felt like Ruth was here and I would give her a hug. The first one is she started talking about lust and that overwhelm, and I'm like, what? That just blew me away. And this is another second moment. Downsides of a virtual meeting. I can't give you a hug, but I wish I could. Um, yeah, I absolutely feel that way. So sometimes yeah, I would kind of get frustrated, but I've tried to think about it this way that if Microsoft is not doing it that way and it's not their focus, that's good because that gives folks like us that opportunity. So I want to stand up for that small guy. And earlier, I was a little bit confused. I was thinking it's like small and medium business, but it's not. there are these small guys, and I'm putting air quotes, which nobody can see, in a lot of big companies, right? And I often walk into really big companies, and I'm sure you do too, like NASA, NBC, Universal, where it's just this, kind of this small finance team, and man, they're struggling, right? I mean, life is
Mm,
hard.
mm,
There's so much on them, and of course, we've seen this trend in corporate America, kind of, you constantly asked to do more with less. Right, if somebody leaves, they don't replace them. Oh, cool. And where does the work go? Right, so the work gets more and more, and they're just scrambling, and it's a hard life. I talk about the data dungeon,
yeah.
data drudgery, where they're not doing, yeah, they're certainly not enjoying their work and so forth. But we get to stand up for that. So I'm gonna continue to do that, inspired by you and other folks
Where
like
do you
you.
think Power BI is going? I'm curious now. How do you
Um,
see the future of Power BI?
well, again, I mean, I feel pretty optimistic, and again, is Microsoft absolutely approaching it the way I would like them to? No, they're not. But again, I see that as a great opportunity. I see that as a tremendous opportunity for some folks like us, and I think that space is just almost limitless. So there's a lot more room there for us to stand up and kind of represent the small guy. So I feel that, and as you talked about how the technology has changed and so forth, and it kind of levels the playing field that folks like us can make a big impact. You don't have to be this big consulting firm. So, oh gosh, I had another thought there. Um, Gosh, what was it? Um, so yeah, this is what I feel. So again, kind of very personal, kind of my perspective, right? So I totally feel you first of all where you said Kerbal is me. And like I'm in the same spot. And again, I have a few folks. Marianne is certainly on my team. She helps a lot, and I have a few other folks who help. But it's a really, really tight ship. And of course, the word that I've always, the first time I heard it, I fell in love with it, which was solopreneur. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. Right? So I love that. But I think in this day and age, it's odd that we are the ones who have power, right? I mean, if you look around, there's all these, what are they called? The phenoms, the YouTube celebrities and Instagram celebrities. I mean, and big
Influencers.
influencers. There you go. Thank you. Right. So, and what's happening? Big companies are seeking them out. So yeah, the tables have kind of turned, and uh, where this personal brand is almost become more powerful. And if you look around, the big brands, they struggle really hard to put a personal face on them,
Out there. Mm.
and we don't have to struggle at all because we are our face. We wear it on our sleeves. Like, yep, Garbal is me. This is me. I'm out there. I'm gonna help you, and that's it. So, man, I love that, and I think there's a lot more there. That's not gonna stop. That's what I feel.
There is one thing actually that I'm super excited about.
Mm-hmm.
That was the best thing they deliver after Power BI, and is this UI flows on Power Automate.
Uh,
Is just
I haven't
amazing.
checked that out. UI
Oh
flows.
yeah, you have to. Oh my god, that is robot process automation (RPA)
Uh
that is going to put all of us out of jobs.
huh.
Very soon. It's
Okay. All right.
absolutely amazing. You have to check it out.
Perfect. That's great. All right, folks. Let's end on that. Hey, Ruth, I wanted to thank you again so much for being here, and I'm pretty sure everybody enjoyed the session. I certainly did. It was great to talk to you as always. All right. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, folks. Hey, let us know what you felt about the meeting. What did you learn? What your favorite sin was? And we'll see you next time. Until then, Baron.